Your father, he's done the most iconic speech of all time. It's the I Have a Dream speech. What do you remember of the time that he gave that speech?
I was not there in 1963, and I would have been 5 or 6.
About 6.
And so I'm sure we watched it on television, but I honestly don't remember that. But I've heard the speech so many times in terms of presentations, anniversaries. It's been many, many years, over 55 years now. 57. The last year was 57. So this year will be 58 years since he delivered that speech. But almost every time I listen to it and I hear it, I can listen to it and almost recite it by heart. But when I listen to it and hear it, it brings tears to my eyes because it does something to your heart. Now, again, I listen to it all the time, so I can kind of repeat certain things about the speech. But when I listen and I hear it, it evokes emotion. As one of the greatest speeches ever delivered, it's melodious. It's like a song of liberation to people who are being mistreated or have been mistreated or oppressed for a long time, but yet it gives you a sense of hope, a feeling of change can occur. And so it's a magnificent, certainly one of the greatest speeches ever delivered of all times. So, he was dad to me, but I also have to look at him as this incredible human being that had to be touched by God. He was on a mission. He was prophetic in his messages, because if you listen to speeches today, you can't tell when they were delivered, other than the fact that he may use the word Negro. But there are speeches where he uses the word Black, and you may think, well, wow, that was yesterday, not 60 years ago. So again, it's prophetic, it's profound, it is beyond moving, lifting up people. And he took the major documents that those who purport to be the founding fathers created, whether it was the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, and he took those words and used them in such a way so that, mainstream society and those who consider themselves thought leaders would have to say, he has used these words in such a way that it represents all people. And he was remarkable in putting that language together in such a way, as I said, so that it's like a symphony.
Do you ever remember talking to your father about that speech?
No, I didn't have that. I don't remember speaking to him about that speech in particular. There were sermons that he did not every Sunday, many Sundays. And I may ask him a question or two about a sermon, but I don't remember having a conversation about I Have a Dream with him.
Did you see him prepare the speech, or, working towards that famous speech in front of so many people? He must have prepared it or recited it at home, or do you have any memories about things like that, perhaps?
No, because he did many iterations of the speech, what most people don't know. In 1963, the finishing touches of the speech were done in Washington at the Willard Hotel in August of 1963. But he had done an iteration of the I Have a Dream speech in Detroit back in June of that year, when there was a march where over 100,000 people marched down Woodward Avenue in Detroit, Michigan. He had done another iteration, or his first iteration, back in the late 50s in Montgomery. So this speech developed over time. But I did not necessarily physically see him or know that he may have been writing that particular speech. He did do some of the work in our home in the study. There was a study in the back of our home that was right next to my mother and father's room, where he would go. There were all kinds of Bibles and historical books in that library. And oftentimes, before on Saturday evenings, he would be preparing his speeches. So his sermon, excuse me, for the Sunday morning. So I was aware of that, but we'd have to be quiet. I don't remember ever interacting during that time because it was quiet time for him to prepare.
What changes have you seen in the world, or lack of changes, since your father's speech? And do you think he would give that same speech today?
Well, I think that he certainly, that speech still resonates and does not, has so much meaning to our world. I think, yes, it could still be delivered. Again, as long as you have the triple evils of poverty, racism, and violence, there's an application for nonviolence. What he and my mother wanted to see in our nation was a nation where families would be able to live in the beloved community. And it's clear that there are communities where that exists, but many communities, it does not exist. And part of it, there are a whole range of issues and reasons as to why. Number one, you've got a society where 1% of the population controls 50% of the wealth. And that is a remedy for disaster. And if we don't change that model, I'm not sure just how long our society will live or will sustain. In other words, if that 1% who consumes that 54% goes to 60 and 70%, that is going to wipe out our world. And so that model is not sustainable. We've got to find a way to create options and opportunity for more people. I say that, though, to say that his speeches, not just I Have a Dream, are so relevant even today, perhaps even more so, because we've got 7.5 billion people on a planet. We've got, immense poverty globally. We've got racial issues, not just in the United States, but all over in many places around the planet. So we've got to change that trajectory. And that's part of, what the task that we feel we have through the Drum Major Institute. And Arndrea, as president, can certainly share and expound upon that.
As Martin was saying, one of the things that we really feel charged to do through the Drum Major Institute is what we call democratize the King legacy. Because what we know is that Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, they have a path forward for all of us, even in 2021 and beyond, in how we can resolve a lot of the issues and the trials that we're seeing today. Martin talked about how his father talked about the triple evils of racism and poverty and militarism. And we believe that with embracing the values of peace, justice, and equity is a way to create the beloved community that both of Martin's parents talked and worked so hard to do. And in order to democratize the King legacy, it really is about each of us tapping into our unique power and prowess, and no longer idolizing Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, but living up to those ideals and through those principles. And that's what we hope to do through our work at the Drum Major Institute.
58 years now after, Dad's being assassinated, what kind of world, do we have or do we want to have? I think that he and my mother throughout her life clearly articulated a vision of creating a community where these values that we've just enumerated can be fulfilled. And I want us to collectively come together as a world community to create, number one, to knock down these barriers that we should have resolved some years ago. in my judgment, we should be at a different place. Okay, we are not. We are at a time, a troubling time. We, as a global community, economies have been intercepted. Businesses have been decimated because of the pandemic. And somehow we have to create that climate where humankind can reemerge. There's an old saying about the phoenix rises again. And the hope is that we as a world community can rise again, because we are just scratching the surface of who we should become or who we can become as a global community, as a nation in the United States. We are nowhere near where we should be around achieving the issues of freedom, justice, and equality. My dad gave his life, and many others, so that we might have this freedom. But yet, unfortunately, in my own state of Georgia, just last week, the governor signed a regressive and suppressing voting rights bill, actually, with 98 pages that suppresses the right to vote. Dad and his team and others, Dr. C.T. Vivian, who I talked about, John Lewis, Amelia Boynton, and a host of others, women and men, fought to get the right to vote. We had a Voting Rights Act in 1965 that existed until 2013. And then the United States Supreme Court decimated the Voting Rights Act. And since that time, little by little, from time to time, certain elected officials have attempted to suppress the right to vote. Well, we came to 2020 and a pandemic occurred. And as a result, we had to allow people to vote in a different way. Absentee balloting and all kinds of things that we should have already allowed. So more people voted than ever before in the history of elections for the United States presidency. 81 million people voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. 75 million people voted for Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence. And my point is, that's more people than ever voted. Well, in our state of Georgia and 43 other states, by the way, there's legislation that's brewing to minimize the opportunity for people to vote. The Georgia state governor, our governor, he's the governor of a state, and the Secretary of State, they basically said we didn't have any issues with voting. And as I said, the other thing we did was on January 5th, we had a second election for United States Senate. For the first time, Georgia elected its first Black senator and its first Jewish senator. Senator John Ossoff, the Jewish senator, and Senator Raphael Warnock, the African-American senator, who is also the pastor of Ebenezer, where my father preached. Now, after all of this, the legislature comes into session and they pass these draconian laws to reduce the number of days for voting, to reduce the number of sites where you can drop off ballots. Even in the bill is a provision that says if people are standing in lines waiting for long periods of time, you cannot even bring them water. That's a crime. There's something wrong with legislation like that. So in 2021, we are fighting a system that's trying to reduce and restrict the right to vote for Black people, for students, for seniors, for brown people, as opposed to expanding the right to vote. Now, by the same token, we're going around the world talking about democracy and expanding democracy, but we're reducing democracy right at home. So what that means is we've got some big fights to engage in. And because of these 43 or 42 other states that are looking at legislation, we got a number of more fights to do.